The home of common sense, they couldn't keep us away, I'm afraid. We've had to do it because, of course, the world is going completely and utterly insane. But what do you make of this? I mean, you have obviously witnessed plenty of skirmishes politically across the border. We saw what happened during the Brexit debates with Ireland really siding with the EU. Now, of course, they're talking about bringing in emergency legislation to send migrants back to us. What's going to happen?
Well, I have to have forgive me if I give a little bit of a wry smile about all of this, because what we're seeing here is real kind of double standards almost. So the Irish wanting to have it both ways.
Yeah.
They stayed in the European Union. They were angry that we left. They tried to ensure that we got a really bad deal and that Northern Ireland would be kind of left out, as we know, through the protocol, and it still is. And now we have this situation where quite frankly, I'm not so sure that it's actually true that a lot of more asylum seekers are going to the Republic because of the Rwanda bill. I mean, I think that's quite convenient for Rishi Sunak to be able to say that, oh, look, another country says that, the Rwanda deterrent is actually working. Right. But of course, what the Taoiseach's really concerned about is the fact that they have had an almost open border situation there for some years, and now local people, local communities are actually out protesting, and we've seen some quite large and demonstrations and community anger at the fact that many asylum seekers are being taken across into really rural areas and literally dumped, and this has caused huge problems for the government. And there's an election coming in the Republic as well as there is. So I'm pleased that finally it looks like at least the Home Secretary has pulled out of a meeting today, but obviously the Secretary of State's going to meet. And I just hope that our government doesn't do as it usually does, give in. Yes.
Well, what's your impression or your understanding of how many of these migrants are getting to Ireland? Because before this particular story came up, that many of them were leaving from here and going to Belfast and then somehow crossing the border, I was under the impression that a lot of the migrants that they were getting into Ireland were coming directly to Ireland, from France, if you like.
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, there hasn't been the kind of checks and opposition earlier on in the last number of years to the number of immigrants coming to the Republic of Ireland. And I think the Irish government is realising now that their policy is leading to all sorts of problems. But of course, Northern Ireland and the Republic, because the Republic said that they didn't even want a camera there to dare, that would be terrible if a little bit of cheese that shouldn't go into the European Union or some other piece of so they wouldn't have any cameras or anything at the border where the frontier should be. And of course, for many, many years, long before we left the European Union, there has been a common travel area, so people in the Republic of Ireland can move freely. So this is a two-way street, really, because there has been some concerns that even if the Rwanda bill went through and was successful, which I think we all have our doubts about, that many people could come from the Republic into Northern Ireland and over into the rest of the United Kingdom without, and that the way that the protocol is working and that we've been left in Northern Ireland, in the European Union, in all sorts of areas to do with trade, right, that legally the Rwanda bill might not even apply to Northern Ireland. So, this is a real issue that needs to be sorted. But I'm afraid that the Irish government won't really do very much to help, I think, in terms of what they're trying to do now.
No, exactly. And I mean, it was slightly tongue-in-cheek when I said it this morning, but it sounds less tongue-in-cheek if you look at it. I suggested, why don't we, instead of spending hundreds of millions of pounds sending people to Rwanda on planes that may or may not take off, why don't we just put them on the Stranraer Belfast ferry in a car, costs 130 quid, and they can cross into Belfast and they can meander their way down into the Republic. And it's a bit like, what the some American governors were doing, flying plane loads of asylum seekers from Texas and California up to Boston and New York, where the Democrats would have to deal with them on their own territory.
Well, you see, the problem, Michael, is that Northern Ireland's a really lovely place.
I know.
and therefore they probably all would want to stay here. And there is, of course, with many of them, confusion about Ireland. You know, it's people, even people in Great Britain, sort of think of Northern Ireland sometimes as being part of Ireland, the Republic. So I don't think that's, but I can see that you know, that certainly there's an open border. Anyone can walk across.
Right.
What the Irish government might start doing is putting more checks on trains, the train that goes from Dublin, and also buses. But you know what they have to do, and what the Irish people, many of them, are calling for. And of course, as usual, what happens is the people who are out demonstrating at the weekend, very peaceful families and so on, out in a part of Wicklow, were, you know, immediately labelled far right.
Of course.
So, you know, no ordinary person is allowed to say, well, hang on, let's have a little discussion about a number of migrants were coming and whether we can cope with that. Right. They're all just immediately labelled as either racist or far right.
Well, this has always been the problem, in the same way that you and I remember very well that during the Brexit conversations, we were assured by the Irish government that if there was ever any kind of border across the Republic and Northern Ireland, there would be terrorist activity restarted, and, you know, people would die. All absolute rubbish. But here's the question: is the Irish Sea now going to become the new English Channel? Because we saw at the weekend the French doing something I'd again advocated for, which was to stick a knife into the dinghy before it gets into the water. So you're not putting anybody's life in danger, but you're literally stopping people, and we can see it here, stopping people from getting into the water so they can't make the trip. You know, I can't imagine the Irish government doing that, can you?
No, and I think we don't, you know, we get slightly rougher seas as well more regularly. But I do agree with you on that. It was the first time I thought all that money we've given to France, they must have bought lots of knives or something, because it certainly did look like at last they were doing something.
Right. World's most expensive Rambo knife. 3 billion.
Yes, absolutely. But however, it was good to see that actually happening, because it is unsafe for those boats to be coming, as we saw recently.
Yes.
And you know, our country just our government doesn't seem to have the will to actually turn them back and do what it would be needed. So at least maybe part of our money that's gone to France, the millions, is actually going to work.
Yeah.